Good evening, everyone. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. My name is David Zivin, and I'm a board member with Kids in Danger. Along with Dawn Kasserman, I'm also co-chair for our annual Best Friend Award Night. I'm honored tonight to introduce our guests for a conversation on legislative achievements in the area of children's product safety, as well as the current regulatory environment. I have just a few announcements to begin with, and then we'll get tonight's conversation going. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with us, Kids in Danger is a nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting for product safety. KID was founded in 1998 by Linda Ginzel and Boaz Kazar, the parents of 16-month-old Danny Kazar, who died when a portable crib collapsed on his neck in his Chicago child care home. The crib had been recalled 5 years earlier, and the child care provider had been inspected just a week before. KID was founded to prevent tragedies like that. So tonight is the second of three conversations with KID. When we realized our Best Friend Award Night could not take place in May, we of course wanted to find a way to still raise funds. We also saw an opportunity to spread the word about the many things KID works on. We are planning a third conversation on September 17th with a group of investigative reporters, and our rescheduled Best Friend Award Night will take place on October 15th, a virtual tribute to our 2020 Best Friend Award honorees, Danny and Ann Shapiro. But on to tonight. This evening has been generously sponsored by Heather Mason and Perry Lentine. We're hoping to have some time for a brief Q&A session at the end of the discussion. Please send your questions in via the Zoom chat function. So this is a stacked panel. It's a power trio. I'm truly delighted to introduce these folks. Our moderator, whom many of you will recognize, is the Executive Director of Kids in Danger, Nancy Coles. Nancy met Linda Ginzel soon after Danny died when she was working for the Coalition for Consumer Rights. And they worked together to pass the Illinois Children's Product Safety Act, banning the sale of recalled or dangerous children's products, as well as their use in child care facilities. Nancy briefly served on the board of KID and became Executive Director in July 2001. She'll be talking this evening with two amazing guests. Please welcome first Remington A. Gregg. Remington is currently counsel for civil justice and consumer rights with Public Citizen, the nonprofit consumer advocacy organization that champions the public interest in the halls of power. Previously, Remington served as an attorney at the Human Rights Campaign, or HRC, the nation's largest LGBT organization, where he worked on a wide variety of justice issues. Prior to joining HRC, he was associate counsel and advisor for open government in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Today, his portfolio includes promoting a fair and accessible justice system, consumer rights, and product safety. Finally, we're really thrilled to have with us tonight the U.S. Representative for the 9th District of Illinois, Jan Schakowsky. Congresswoman Schakowsky has been in public service for 3 decades and was elected to Congress in 1998. Among numerous other positions and activities, she is chair of the House Energy and Commerce, the Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. In 2010, she was appointed to serve on President Obama's National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform. Among the bills she has sponsored are the Danny Kazar Child Product Safety Notification Act of 2005, known to all of KID's friends as Danny's Law, the Sturdy Act to stop tip-overs of unstable, risky dressers on youth, which passed the House this past autumn, and the Safe Cribs Act of 2019. You won't be surprised to hear that she is a previous recipient of KID's Best Friend Award and has been an extraordinarily effective and steadfast ally in the cause of fighting for product safety. We're so thrilled to have you all this evening. Please join me in a virtual welcome of our special guests, and I'm happy to turn things over to Nancy Coles.
Thanks, David. Thanks for that warm introduction, and welcome to both of our guests. I'm so excited to be talking with both of you, even virtually. You're so important to our work on children's product safety. So welcome to KID's virtual conversation. Jan, let's start with you. what led you to public service, and how did that evolve into this direction of being such a champion for product safety?
Well, actually, I began in the grocery store when I was a young mother with two little kids. I was in my mid-20s and had these babies. And so I was kind of in this housewife mode and realized, along with about 5 other women, that we had no clue how old our food was. So all of you who actually check those dates on milk and all kinds of products, they weren't there. Everything was coded. And so this small group of women got together and modestly called ourselves National Consumers United, because we figured if we cared, probably most of the shoppers, mostly women, cared too. Anyway, we began a sleuth campaign to push the stock boys against the shelf and make them tell us how old the food was, and ended up cracking hundreds of codes and even publishing a black covered code book so others could find out how old food was. And we found things on the shelf that were days, weeks, months, and years beyond the date that the manufacturer said they should, or that the retailer said they should. And so we began to do store inspections. We called in the press, things we knew nothing about, actually, including much about the food industry. But we unveiled something that really hit a nerve with a lot of consumers, as you have, Nancy, and Kids in Danger has done, that it just wasn't right that we didn't have this information. And this, we became a shareholder of one share of Jewel, and at the time there was National Tea Company, and so we were kind of this little guerrilla housewife team. And finally, Jewel on its own began to advertise, "Come to Jewel, we have freshness dates on our food." Oscar Mayer, who had been a big offender with their packaged meats, began to put a use-by date on there, or sell-by date. And now it's pretty much ubiquitous everywhere. And what that experience did was really change me from an ordinary housewife to an ordinary housewife that could make a difference in the world. And so I became an activist. And it wasn't years till many years later that I actually ran for public office. But it really started there, that feeling of empowerment that I wish more people could feel about themselves. Just being an ordinary person and fighting for a cause and making things happen. John Lewis has certainly shown us the way as someone who could make a difference in the world. Not comparing myself, believe me, I'm just saying, same idea, just a guy he was, who had a dream and a vision and courage to do it. And I'm trying to be that person too.
Yeah, every good idea needs a champion, that's for sure, to work on it. How about you, Remington? What led you to Public Citizen, and how does your work now touch on the issue of product safety?
Well, my entire career has been in public service or public interest, and it, excuse me, is my passion to try to serve a greater good, whatever that may mean to you. You know, what we do at Public Citizen, and one thing I'm really proud of is, I mean, we do fight for everyday people in the halls of power. That is what we do. You know, there are a ton of corporate lobbyists and corporate lawyers out there to defend big business, and there aren't a lot of people out there trying to get a fair shake for workers and consumers. And we really, the way I like to think of it, Public Citizen, is we are a government and corporate watchdog group. We try to slow down corporate power from overriding and overtaking all of us, and also holding government accountable. So obviously right now we're pretty busy trying to ensure that both companies are doing the right thing by their workers and consumers during the pandemic, and also that the government is allocating money and resources in a fair and equitable way. And what I work on at Public Citizen is both access to justice issues and consumer protection, which includes student loan and other consumer protection type issues, as well as product safety, ensuring that, going back to the world of Ralph Nader, who founded us, harkening back all the way to then, that we have products that are safe, and that we hold government and companies accountable if those products aren't safe.
Great. Yeah. Jan, we have worked together for a long time. When you first started looking at product safety, especially for children, what surprised you? What did you find that was a surprise?
I think the greatest surprise was that there really wasn't a protective shield around children and children's products. That and I found actually with most products, but particularly children's products, that consumers have an expectation. If something is on the shelf and it is for sale, and you can go in and buy it, that somebody somewhere, the government, has made sure that it is not going to kill your child. And so I think what really surprised me was that there were no prior laws that said you had to test something, you had to make sure that it worked, you had to make sure that it was safe, and that our children were essentially like test dummies in cars. And then if something went wrong, well, maybe you'd be able to quickly solve the problem. And that was the other thing that was kind of surprising, is it takes a while and it takes too long. And often, once the problem has been discovered, many other children are injured and even killed by those very same products. So that was just unacceptable.
Right. Yeah. How about you, Remington? Anything as you have been working on these product safety issues with us?
Specific product safety issues that we've been working on?
Or any that you've worked on, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a few, and I cut me off if I go too long. I think that two big ones are in the product safety world: recall effectiveness, and that's shorthand, but what that really means is ensuring that when a product is taken off the market, that they actually, number one, the government, and usually that means the Consumer Product Safety Commission, but the government informs consumers far and wide, so that we know that product is unsafe, and that they also have a mechanism for getting those products back. And that's the problem. The problem is getting those products back to manufacturers rather than them lingering in a room somewhere in someone's house. And the CPSC doesn't do a great job of it. And I think one of the reasons why they don't do a great job is that they aren't utilizing technology as much as they should. Now some people, I think, feel like, ugh, there we go about talking about technology again. I think as someone who worked in the White House OSDP, and as a millennial, I mean, technology is very, very important. And we should be using it more to make our government better and more effective. And we're not. And so that's a real problem. And the second is this ability to, which some people would call the secrecy law, which is, and repealing that secrecy law, which is 6B of the Consumer Product Safety Act, which prevents the CPSC from releasing certain information unless they get essentially permission from a company to do so. The company has veto power. And that has a serious impact on the work of the commission, on the work of the commission to regulate products, to enforce the law against them, and for civil society organizations like Public Citizen and KID and others to ensure that the government is doing their job. So those are two things that kind of keep me up thinking about how can the CPSC do its job better to protect children by fixing those two issues.
Yeah, great. And I think we'll talk a little bit longer too about that secrecy issue, because I know for all of us it's a major stumbling block to CPSC actually doing the kind of job they could do without that provision. So I appreciate that. Jan, as I said, we've worked together for a long time. You first introduced what became part of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, or Danny's Law, back in 2001 when we first talked about this idea, this radical idea that would require children's products to be tested for safety before they were sold, which, as you mentioned, was not the case before then. It was a long road to the passage of that to the CPSIA in 2008, lots of back and forth, and we all worked very hard. In terms of that particular piece of legislation or the changes that were in there, what about it resonated with you? And tell us a little bit about what it was like in that fight to get this law passed.
First of all, let me say that this issue was brought to me by kids and Linda Ginzer and her son, Danny, who died. And so many of the bills that we've gotten passed, I have to give credit to parents who, in a time of such incredible deep grief, are able to stand up and say, I don't want any other child to face this. We need to change it. And so one of the major provisions now of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, which did become the law, was Danny's law that says that these children's products need to be tested. We need to be assured that they are going to be safe when sold. And that was, such an important breakthrough when Linda came and testified to the Congress, and I think really enlightened so many people. But it was also a different time. We passed it in 2008. That's before Barack Obama was elected, so signed into law by George Bush. We negotiated it with, the Democrats were in the majority in the House, and I remember negotiating on this bill with the Republicans. And it initially passed almost unanimously. I think there may have been one vote. A big bill, a big important bill that really was a dramatic change in the law. And we were able to work congenially together, even though corporations were not so happy about it. I mean, this was really about consumers getting the corporate sector in line, and we were able to do it. And it wasn't just Linda, but the advocacy of Kids in Danger and other consumer protection organizations really made a difference. Coming in and arguing, Public Citizen and others being there as a strong voice. So I think the stars were aligned. We did a good job, and it was the private sector, the public really, that came together with legislators and finally got this landmark bill passed in the House and then in the Senate and signed into law.
Yes, it was quite an achievement. I think we had been talking about those ideas for a long time, and as you said, it suddenly all came together. One of the things in that law is saferproducts.gov, which is a database where consumers can report incidents, and it's outside of that secrecy clause 6B that we were talking about, so that other consumers can see the information that consumers post about incidents they've had with products. But that law, that 6B, is still in place. And Remington, as you think about the issues that you work on in terms of product safety, what role does that secrecy play in how difficult it is to get things through, or what impact does it have on safety?
And that's a good question. And it's a tough answer to explain sometimes, because there's lots that we know, and there's also lots that we don't always know, although we know. So 6B, what it does is it prevents, number one, the agency from releasing information pretty quickly. Because if they want to say company A has a problem, they have to go to that company, And the company says, well, hey now, wait a minute, I don't think we have a problem. And then they go back and forth. And if they really cannot agree, the company is going to say, well, our corporate lawyers think that we should go to court. And so then the agency backs up. And what often happens is, instead of going through that dance back and forth, the agency instead will just release generic information. That's kind of hard to say exactly what it is they're trying to talk about. So for example, an incline sleep product, they would say, be careful about incline sleep products. Well, I mean, you may know what an incline sleep product was. I certainly didn't, just by that generic name, but a lot of people knew and know what a rock and play is. But they never said that because they were effectively barred from doing that. So number one, it stops release of quick information. Number two, it stops us from being able to hold the agency accountable because we don't fully know all the communications that go on back and forth with a company as it relates to enforcement actions, as it relates to how well a company is implementing a recall. So we're not able to do our jobs, and journalists aren't able to do their jobs as well. And then finally, it's a waste of money. And I would say the agency has actually said this itself, that a lot of money is spent on having to go back and forth with a company because it all has to be done by paper. The law has not been updated. So this stuff is not done via email, which boggles the mind in 2020. So it's time consuming and it costs the taxpayer money, and it isn't necessary. And so one of the big things that we need to do, and I think we'll talk more about this with in a bit, I suspect, as we're talking about the agency and what it needs to do in the future, is to take a real hard look at 6B.
Great. Jan, anything you want to add on 6B?
Well, I was glad that the issue of the rock and play, the incline sleepers, was brought up, because we were successful in getting recalls of unsafe cribs, the drop side cribs, which my kids grew up with, and were in most households, and now have the world's strongest legislation to protecting kids from being killed in cribs. But now we have these products that and actually we passed a bill that is now languishing on Mitch McConnell's desk that would say that these slanted incline sleepers and the what do you call it, things, the bumpers in the cribs would be illegal. They are, I mean, children are dying, and yet they are marketed as something, you want to be a great parent. This is the kind of thing that you want to put in a crib, which ends up to be deadly. So we passed a bill specifically on that. That is still not the law of the land. And in terms of getting it quickly off the shelf, as Remy talked about, we still have to deal with this secrecy law that makes it hard for us to move ahead.
Yeah, yes, that's certainly true. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, consumers, and I think especially parents, just believe that if something's for sale, that it's safe. They wouldn't even imagine that something that had killed dozens of children was still being sold as it was until the recall. And so the fact that the agency can't adequately protect consumers when they themselves don't have the information, I think is very troubling for us.
And these marketers aren't stupid. These things are cute. It looks like a good gift. It looks like something that you want for your darling, and yet it's a deadly product.
Right. Yeah. Another issue that we've all addressed together and is a similar, risk in people's home is the issue of furniture tip over. As David mentioned when he introduced you, you introduced HR 2211 the Sturdy Act, which stands for Stop Tip-Overs of Unstable, Risky Dressers on Youth Act, which just goes to show the lengths we'll go to get a good acronym for our legislation. And the bill requires CPSC to develop a very strong mandatory standard that addresses how children interact with furniture, what the furniture might be put on. And it passed the House and is also languishing now in the Senate. A few weeks ago, for our first conversation, we were honored to talk with Crystal Ellis, who's a mom whose son was killed. And I know you've had some interactions with Crystal as well, another one of those parent advocates. Can you tell us more about that and how parents can play a role in fighting for product safety?
Well, first of all, she is an amazing witness at a hearing. You know, I go to a lot of hearings, but you know, her story was just so incredible about her. Was he 2 years old at the time?
Yeah, just about.
Precious baby, just starting to scramble around, and ended up pulling down a dresser on himself and dying. I'll tell you, in my Consumer Protection Committee, we sometimes call it the Kleenex subcommittee, because these stories are so moving. But the courage of her and others who have come and testified on these issues is just so inspiring. So after the hearing, which I think sold everyone on the committee, that was the last vote of the day that was coming up. And so Crystal said to me, "So what else can I do?" I said, "You just come with me right now to the House of Representatives, because this will be an opportunity for you to tell your story." And so we went up to the House, into the cloakroom, where in the good old days before the virus, members were gathered waiting for that last vote so that they could run to the airport. And I introduced Crystal, nice woman. I said, "I think you need to hear her story." And Crystal was able to talk one-on-one, or maybe even two-on-two, you know, to two people at a time, and gathering a group around her to hear the story. And it's hard for any legislator, I think, to think, and I'm just going to let this continue. You know, I'm not going to do anything about this. How do you stand in front of Crystal, who, in fact, I think it was her son's two-year birthday when she came and testified before Congress, or maybe it would have been his.
Yeah, it was his birthday. Yeah, when she was there.
That was his birthday, and so she was one of the most effective lobbyists I have ever seen in getting people to co-sponsor the bill, to get on it, to say, I want to stop this from happening. You know, we got grandparents and parents who are like, oh, you know, and she, clear-eyed, everyone else was weepy, told that story, and I think changed got a lot of support.
Great, thanks for sharing that.
Ask me that question, because it was a special moment. It really was.
Yeah, and I think it just illustrates too how important that personal story is. Unfortunately, that it takes a child and a courageous parent to get some of these issues the attention that they deserve.
You know, the other thing you heard from parents is, I never really thought of that. My kids used to climb on things, and you know, I'm just lucky that it didn't come down and injure or kill my child. And you know, the manufacturers now are saying, well, if you anchor it against a wall. But the truth of the matter is that if you're a tenant and you pay a deposit, you're reluctant to do things like anchor something into the wall. But anyway, the bill passed the House. We're waiting for it to pass the Senate, and we need to get this, in the meantime, also recalled. But we're in a stalemate.
Yeah, I think that's right. Remington, we've worked on these issues as well. And I think, as a KID is a consumer advocacy organization, but we are not in DC, so we rely a lot on those of you that are constantly. So talk a little bit more about CPSC and how consumer organizations work together and can work together to really make a difference.
I just want to, also add to my praise of Crystal, who I've met several times, and she's a great activist, parent activist, and I think we need a few more of those, frankly. So being in DC, you're able to kind of have your ear to ground a bit. A lot of the work that we do with the agency is in the administrative space, obviously, meaning that we're seeking to, help influence rulemaking, provide our comments, whether it's through formal comment rulemaking process or through testifying, which I often do, and other administrative actions. Also working, with Congress to ensure that Congress is playing their role in the oversight. And so we press and we prod the CPSC a lot, and I think as we should. I will give them some credit when credit's due, and I think that they are working to try to, or at least the current leadership is trying to bring more accountability to the agency, seeking to say why they need more money to do their job. And so I think those are good places where we can work more with them. But I would also say that even though KID isn't in DC, that when you work in coalition, a lot of people bring a lot of organizational talents and experiences and different talents, definitely. And I think that, in our coalition of organizations that work on product safety, I think it's small but mighty, and work well together, and know the strengths and weaknesses, and I think help to, ensure that we are have all our bases covered. And I think certainly KID is whether in DC or not, KID is respected, and the voice is valued, and a knowledgeable knowledge of children's safety issues second to none. And I think that, in terms of the work that Congress does and CPSC does, if KID isn't on the list of saying this is okay or giving it seal of approval, I think a lot of people definitely are skeptical that it is something good for children and children's safety. So whether or not you're in DC, I think the knowledge and expertise you bring to the issue is second to none.
Well, thanks. And we are so appreciative of all our partners who are there in DC or around the country, and that we do, as you say, we're small but mighty, but we can have an impact. I'm going to ask a kind of open-ended question next, but before I do that, I want to remind everyone who's listening to please send in some questions. We're going to have time to answer questions. I think your voice added to this conversation will just make it even more interesting. So this is a bit open-ended, but we want to talk about the current regulatory environment. But also, I think in talking about that, we really do have to talk about the impact of COVID on what's going on in terms of legislation and other things. So I will leave it there, talk about what the impact of COVID is, talk about these larger regulatory issues that we're facing now, and then we'll circle back to some questions from the audience. So,
well, if I could begin, okay. One of the things that has really been evident, as it is tonight, is that the internet has become much more important during this COVID crisis. And what we're finding is that for consumers online, it's often a different standard than if you, what's going on in the real world as opposed to the virtual world. In terms of, okay, so I have this sweater on, and if I had taken it out of its package and found that it had a stain or that had a rip, 100%. If I take it back to the store, they're going to be responsible for that. We don't have that in the digital world right now. We don't find that companies will take the responsibility for their platform when there's a third-party seller that could actually be selling a fake product, a dangerous product, and they want to stick to a liability shield. That means that they don't have to take any responsibility. So we need to work on that to make sure that consumers are protected in the virtual world in the same way as they are protected in the actual world. So that's just one example, I think, that we're finding that there are more dangers because of the internet and the lack of corporate responsibility.
Remington?
Well, I mean, I think that that's a really good point. You know, and as Congresswoman Schakowsky said earlier too, when you buy something, you expect that it will be safe. When it's in your home, you expect it to be safe. You're not expected to check it yourself and to make sure that that's not going to tip over and injure a child. So we definitely need to ensure, especially in this COVID time, who knows how long we'll be in quarantine, that what we have out there is safe, and that we have an agency that's responsive to getting unsafe products out of our home very quickly. Another thing that I think I would mention in this time is that consumer advocates are fighting hard against a nominee to the CPSC to be chair of the CPSC, who has spent her career or a big part of her career working for trade associations, working for lobbyists. And given that it's the Consumer Product Safety Commission, not the Lobbyist Safety Commission, we tend to think that a person who believes in consumer safety should be heading that organization. So, I think that during COVID, seeing what's happening on a larger scale with our executive branch and the lack of competence and what that can do when you're in a crisis like this, really going forward, we have to be really careful and work really hard to ensure that we have good, competent people in agencies that are working on behalf of people first and foremost, not on behalf of corporations, which you continue to see they're getting lots of money in different in the different stimulus packages, and that's fine. We want businesses to stay afloat, but first and foremost, we have to ensure that consumers that we protect consumers, that we protect workers, and that first and foremost has to be, at least it will be my mission, over the next however COVID lasts and beyond.
So I cannot resist jumping in, because the President of the United States has designated Nancy Beck, I'm going to say her name, to be the chairman of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which is, we've seen it over and over again. The people who are appointed to head up the Environmental Protection Agency are, that often the appointees are really opposite the mission. The guy who's head of the post office right now, his big qualification is he's a big donor to the president. Otherwise, he has no experience doing that. Well, Nancy Beck has a fair amount of experience, but her experience has really been in the opposite direction of consumer protection for her whole life. And the very idea that she should be head of this committee, even though hopefully it's going to last just a short time, what we need is somebody like a Nancy Coles to be on the consumer product. I mean, you're my choice. So anyway, to be on the Consumer Product Safety Commission, And it does need more resources. It does need, we'll check out all the authorities, but it really could be a much more robust and active agency. So the people matter. The appointees matter. The individuals who are on those commissions really matter. And so hopefully going forward, we can set a fire under the CPSC and have the people who are committed to this work to make the marketplace safe for everyone, not just our children. There's so many issues that we've been dealing with in my committee that are beyond kids. We were able to get a bill passed that had to do with carbon monoxide poisoning and get some more money for communities to be able to get these carbon monoxide testers, and hot cars so the children aren't being killed when they're dying when they're left in cars, that we could have the technologies that prevent that. There's just so many things that we could, that we know that we could be doing that would save lives. Even the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, we saw, Nancy, over the years, every holiday season, we do a press conference, sometimes with the Attorney General, sometimes with a consumer organization. And the number of products on that table has been dwindling because we have passed legislation that deals with a lot of these dangerous products. But we still have a long way to go, and making sure that we have a strong and committed Consumer Product Safety Commission where consumers can work with them to make the world safe for our families.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have a number of questions. I'm going to try and maybe we can do a little rapid fire of these. Here's one for you, Remington. I know you can answer. Who do we write to keep Nancy Beck out of that position?
Oh, yes. You want to write to your United States Senator and say that you oppose it. If you want to be super strategic, write to a United States, if your senator is on the Senate Commerce Committee, that's even better because she's currently stuck in committee. She doesn't have enough votes to get out of committee. We're afraid that the Senate leadership might try some shenanigans to get her out, but call your United States Senator, say no to Beck.
Thank you. A quick question on COVID. What are your thoughts on businesses seeking immunity from COVID-19 claims? And does that portend a trend toward businesses trying to reduce their liability in other ways?
Well, we have an answer to that, and that is to have strong OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, rules and mandates. And then if the companies abide by those mandates, then they're immune. But if they don't, and they know that they are clearly mandated to do certain things, then they would be liable. So one of the things we're trying in the current bill is to strengthen the OSHA, not guidelines, which are like recommendations, but mandates for worker safety.
Exactly, and that's what we need, not immunity. If there are strong standards out there and a company abides by them, they have a defense against any litigation lawsuits. There is no wave of lawsuits out there. There's no wave of litigation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is simply trying to get a wish list item. But I believe that Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer have been very clear, no to immunity.
Great. And I see David's joined us again, and we did promise to end this as close to 6:45 as possible, but our guests have promised to stay around, so we will get back to the questions after I let David say a few words.
Thank you, Nancy. I'll be brief. I was actually trying to come up with an acronym that said, gee, it's good to know that you guys are in DC and we really appreciate your time, but it just didn't come together very well. But thank you in all sincerity for being with us tonight. I just want to thank some sponsors very quickly. First of all, thanks to Dave Gauda, the Assistant Director of KID, for really putting this evening together. Thank you to our lead sponsor for tonight, board member Heather Mason and her husband, Perry Lentine. Thank you to the Best Friend Award sponsors, Lisa Toronto and the Toronto Baking Company, the GATX Company, Linda Ginzel and Boaz Kazar, the Anne and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago, the Tomasic, Coton, and Kasserman Trial Law Firm, and Susan Mead. Tonight's drawing for a fantastic virtual or at-home wine tasting from Wines for Humanity. That drawing will stay open until midnight. All you do to enter is give $20 or more. More is good. There should be some details about that in the chat window, and as always on kidsindanger.org. You can also sign up for the next conversation in September. I really mean that. To know that you guys are in DC working hard for all of us is so inspiring. And thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for staying on a little longer for some more questions. That's it for me. Have a pleasant evening, and thanks.
Thanks, David. So here's a question. Jan, I think this is mostly for you, although maybe Remington too, and that's that the tone of the conversation in DC is so angry and seems unfocused on the issues. Is this the worst that you've seen, and what is the impact on safety issues?
Well, you know, because we have a majority in the House of Representatives, we were able to send a number of bills over to the Senate, where they got stuck because Mitch McConnell doesn't want to do much more than get judges confirmed in the Senate. So that's been a problem. And that's why I think it's really important. You know, I don't want to make this political, but, you know, we do have an opportunity as citizens to change the direction of our country right now, which needs that. And I want to say that we talk about and we hear about the polarization. And if all you watch is C-SPAN, you would think, yes, we are very polarized. But if you ask the American people, they are for making sure that products are safe. They are on our team and want these things to happen. And unfortunately, some of the legislators, the senators, are afraid to buck the kind of corporate mentality that dominates over there right now. And so, you know, we have an opportunity to make those changes. So that's been our problem is getting the bills that have passed the House and in the Senate, and hopefully we're going to see a different environment in not too long from now.
Remington, are you good with that?
I'm good. I'll co-sign all that.
Okay, good. Yeah, so someone asked, looking for a way, I think, to help on some of these things. Would it help if celebrities highlighted these issues, including the key safety bills that are languishing in the Senate, to ideally shame the responsible politicians and corporations, or to affect political change on these safety rules?
I love that idea, because certainly there's some young moms and dads that could participate and be spokespeople. We have to talk more about that and get some of those people lined up, because we are on the right side of history, and we're certainly representing the majority view, I think, of everyday Americans, that they want to be safe. I do want to chime in a little bit on what David was saying on how important this organization is. You know, he thanked us in Congress, but you know, for being in Washington. But I want to tell you, without the advocacy groups, and for me personally, without Kids in Danger, and actually Public Citizen as well, that's been so helpful, it doesn't happen. Because we need the expertise, we need the voices, we need the individuals to speak for themselves to make this happen. So if you can help Kids in Danger tonight, that would be a really good thing.
Thanks, Jan. Great. Let's see, we got a couple other questions. I'm trying to see which would be the best to kind of wrap up our time. Or I'm wondering if instead, maybe we want to, I don't know if there's anything more we want to say about the secrecy clause, 6B, because I know it's a passion of all of ours. So if you guys have more you want to say on that, we can use this time for that. Got a few more minutes.
I mean, I can start on it and then and pass it over to the evening to the Congresswoman. You know, I think that we should be thinking very hard about how we, you know, I think without getting too wonky or nerdy, you know, after Watergate, we got a lot of reforms because of the lawlessness of that time and the lack of transparency. I think we have an opportunity now where we are seeing, you know, there is a similar sort of opaqueness, shall we say, within government, within executive branch, and we should, and people are kind of tired. People tired of corporate power running their lives. They're tired of not having enough accountability. And I think the CPSC can play a huge role, but not the way it is now. And I think it's the job of all of us as citizens to think about how we can reimagine an agency that was created to do big things and has yet to do those big things, but has the capacity to do it. And we should be thinking about over the next year, 2 or 3, how we can push that agency to do that, to live its full potential out, and to truly be the bulwark, the safety, the safeguard for all of us and for all consumers.
Well, let me chime in. Remington is really the expert on this. We need to repeal 6B. That is a section of the law that really empowers, in a very dangerous way, companies that have unsafe products, because it gives them the power to make decisions about the timing and the release of information and when things can be recalled and the press release that gets put out to talk about their unsafe product. And this was a gift to the corporations that sell products that affect our children and others, and that's just not right. And so, giving them this leverage, this imbalance of power, means that we have to just plain old repeal 6B and explain how, and I think we can come up with example after example, how because of 6B, more children died than needed to, and that's not right. So, we have to get on it.
Yeah, that's for sure. I know I said that was the end, but we do have a question here from our friend Crystal that I want to read. So first, she thanks you for your kind words.
Is Crystal there?
Talk about the point of online and app marketplaces. The lack of oversight of these platforms that allow things to be sold secondhand or sometimes even new that have been recalled. Is there a way to require them to be on top of this with algorithms, human oversight, the ability to flag by users, all things that currently don't seem to be working very well? Should consumer advocates be stepping into draft legislation to regulate this?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm all for that. I've been really taking on some of these platforms that have third-party sellers. Don't feel an obligation to vet them in any way, and then you go ahead and try and reach that seller. It's pretty much impossible to do. So we're working right now on legislation that would make that change. And we're going to need consumers. We went through the golden age of the internet. Everything seemed so rosy. And we have seen that companies able to exploit that for themselves, and as a consequence, be a danger to consumers. So we need to work together on those regulations.
Great. Anything to add, Remington? Okay.
I'll just co-sign to that.
All right. So thank you both so much. This was so fun, both to see you in this time of quarantine and talk with you, and really appreciate you giving kids your time this evening. And thank you to all our attendees, and look forward to talking about more issues in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.